Countering Iran has been a foreign policy objective of U.S. administrations since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. To policymakers, Iran's efforts to extend its influence across the Middle East and its role as a state sponsor of terror have genuine implications for regional security. Within Iran, its leaders have to contend with growing unrest over its political isolation and the economic stagnation brought about by its revolutionary government, now nearly 40 years old. Revolution and reform, the making of modern Iran. Next on Great Decisions.
Great Decisions is produced by the Foreign Policy Association.
In cities across Iran, protesters say it's time for change. The most recent wave of demonstrations are the largest to hit Iran since 2009, when the Green Revolution was put down by security forces.
The recent protests in Iran are a major challenge for the leadership in the country. And what's different is that they're challenging the legitimacy of the regime itself.
We're seeing a whole new kind of protest. They are in small urban areas or small rural areas. These are not in places we would often associate with protesting.
The new ones are actually much more economic motivation, economic sentiments, the feeling especially among the poor, and some of the major promises made during the revolution have not been met.
Iranians are fed up with economic stagnation, unemployment, and a lack of political reform by Iran's revolutionary government, now run by President Hassan Rouhani. It was a very different type of protest which rocked the streets of Tehran in 1979. A handful of different groups, from students and left-wing Marxist organizations to Islamists, took to the street to demand the removal of Iran's hereditary leader, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi.
The 1979 revolution was largely led by Iran's middle classes, not the poor.
The revolution actually played out over about 14 months, and it brought together a motley array of political forces. You had leftists and communists, you had nationalists, you had academics and technocrats who wanted to see a different kind of system.
Although they had their own interests in deposing the Shah, nonetheless, they somehow came together with a common objective.
In 1953, a CIA-backed coup d'etat overthrew Iran's democratically elected leader.
For many Iranians, it goes back at least until 1953, when the CIA and Britain's MI6 joined forces to overthrow a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh.
Although Iran had never been a colony of Britain, it was, you could say, a neo-colony because most of the economic resources were owned by the British Oil Company. And what Mossadegh did, his whole campaign was built on getting Iranian independence from Britain by nationalizing the British Iranian Oil Company.
The Near East became another world trouble spot with the nationalization and seizure of the world's largest oil refinery in Abadan in Iran.
No Iranian will ever forget it. The U.S. deposed Mossadegh, brought the Shah back, he had fled the country, and said, here are the keys to your kingdom again.
Protesters decried the Shah as an American puppet who wanted to open Iran to foreign oil firms. He was widely derided as corrupt and authoritarian.
I think over time that resentment built up and built up and built up. It wasn't just the Shah, he was merely the puppet of the Americans. So that was a weapon ready to use for the Islamists who eventually took power.
The Iranian Revolution was as much about shedding foreign influence as it was getting rid of the monarchy. And the United States, in the aftermath of World War II, had become the dominant political foreign power influence in Iran.
In the imagination, in the memory of the students, 53 was very much alive, and they exaggerated the power and the influence of the United States.
The anti-Americanism of the revolution didn't come from its religious side. It came from the extent to which it adopted the 1960s, 70s, third world anti-American imperialism rhetoric. Many of the early thinkers were products of Western universities.
Amid the revolutionary fervor, Iranian students seized control of the U.S. Embassy, taking 52 diplomats hostage. An exiled cleric, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, returned to Iran, emerging as the revolution's undisputed leader and the face of the hostage crisis. It would last an excruciating 444 days. Seizing upon the power vacuum left in the wake of the Shah, Khomeini became the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Khomeini emerged as a leader for a number of reasons. One is obviously he tapped into religious sentiments, but also by 79, all secular, liberal, national organizations had been dismantled by the Shah, so there was a political vacuum. You get the situation where a charismatic figure can appear. And the charismatic figure is not just a very popular figure, but almost a figure that's seen as having authority from above.
Khomeini had the good judgment, the good fortune, probably both, to kind of stand above the factional infighting. How much was luck? Well, I'm reminded of a saying from Roman times, luck is what happened when opportunity meets preparation.
3 decades would pass before Iran would see protests close to that scale again. But this time, the protesters demanded democratic reform. The Green Revolution was sparked by the 2009 re-election of hardline President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad over his reform-minded rival in an election that protesters say was rigged.
The Green Movement in 2009 was the biggest uprising against the regime since the 1979 revolution. Millions took to the streets in Tehran and major cities to protest what many believed was the fraudulent re-election of President Ahmadinejad.
The country was divided. Some politicians and some part of the nation, they believed their vote has been cheated. And some politicians and part of the nation, they believed no election was fair.
The 2009 Green Movement captured the attention of a lot of the world. It certainly captured the attention of many Americans. Video images of unarmed protesters confronting not just the police, but in some cases, troops.
To some, the Green Revolution was a missed opportunity for the Obama administration to support the protests in order to bring about regime change. Some demonstrators used social media and signs written in English, signaling a desire for Iran to rejoin the international community.
I definitely vote to Mr. Mir Hossein Mousavi because he's going to come and change this horrible situation.
President Obama understood that this is peaceful demonstration. This is a protest by Iranian people, although there are the other Iranians, they are supporting the election, but he was not after regime change.
They were trying to directly message the outside and particularly get international support for their cause in Iran. So it was a very interesting case that the Iranian people were trying to build ties and reach out to the international community.
It was an interesting episode that will be studied in terms of protest movements and the use of social media. But ultimately, I think we should be careful of suggesting that there was an appeal or a broad international effort.
In 2013, voters elected Hassan Rouhani as president after a campaign in which he promised to fix the economy and re-engage with the world.
I think successful presidential candidates, particularly moderate candidates, have to bring together a coalition of people who see promise in them from different angles. And Rouhani did that very successfully.
Hassan Rouhani was elected on a platform of two principles. One was doing a nuclear deal with the United States, and the interrelated second issue of ending Iran's pariah status and ending economic sanctions. And because the majority of Iran's population by 2013 had been born since the revolution, they had no attachment emotionally to the past.
The Islamic Revolution saw the overthrow of a monarchy. What it got in exchange was a unique combination of theocratic autocracy and Enlightenment democracy.
Iran's political system is unique in modern times. Its constitution is based on French and Belgian law, but it has added a whole layer of Islamic institutions so that there's a president, but a supreme leader who has ultimate veto power. There's an elected parliament, but there's also a guardian council of Islamic scholars that can veto legislation and deny candidates the right to run because they're not Islamic enough.
This is a unique system. It's never existed in history, and people thought it wouldn't function, but it has functioned over 30 years.
Political power ultimately rests with high-ranking Islamic clergy, or ayatollahs. Like revolutionaries everywhere, Iranians soon learned there is a difference between overthrowing a government and running one. When Iraq invaded Iran in 1980, it allowed authorities to unify Iranians behind a common enemy. Exploiting the war as a national security crisis, the government cracked down on political dissent, cementing the Ayatollah's authority.
Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran in 1980 provided a real pivot for the revolutionaries to secure their hold on the system, for the clerics to consolidate religious rule.
For Iran, that war was an existential threat. Iranians are very sensitized to the threat from outside. If you are going to go after a political adversary, you paint him with that brush.
Iranians are allowed limited representation in parliament. All candidates must be approved by Iran's Guardian Council.
Elections are very lively. They often have to let a liberal or a moderate also run, and that always has a danger for them.
The Guardian Council can decide who runs in the election. It can vet people, and it does that very rigorously. Once the voting happens, the voting is fairly free. Iranians believe that generally in most elections, the results of the elections does reflect their vote.
Divides exist within Iran between the Islamist view that government exists to struggle against injustice and more secular perspectives on issues like running the economy.
We have 2-3 big different school of thoughts, how to work with the region, how to work with the US, how to work with the West. For the governing system, everything based on religious values or national interest or secularism.
A lot of the sentiments that are expressed are actually secular, although they don't avowedly say they're secular.
It has been up to President Hassan Rouhani, a supporter of reform, to bridge that divide. The Iranian economy has been inextricably linked to its foreign policy for decades. The international community has imposed sanctions on Iran in response to the hostage crisis, its ongoing sponsorship of what Washington has designated terrorist groups, and in more recent years, its illegal pursuit of nuclear weapons technology.
Hassan Rouhani's election reflected the fact the Iranian public really wanted a nuclear deal. They really wanted to end sanctions. They felt that this was the moment to do it.
There's critical societal tensions between those who want to see Iran move in a more secular, moderate direction open to the West, and more hardline elements and Islamist elements who want to keep Iran a more closed society, more conservative society. And that tension is really coming to the surface with the dire economic pressures that are facing Iran today.
There was no way for President Rouhani to fully address domestic economic issues without large and pragmatic shifts in foreign policy. That meant getting the ear of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, and convincing him of the merits of the nuclear deal.
I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Some analysts argue that sanctions removed and then reimposed when the U.S. withdrew from the nuclear deal are an existential threat to the Iranian government.
Ideologies that advocate and promise utopia often are challenged or even eliminated, in the end because of economic reasons. And so economically, it is deeply vulnerable. It does have oil as a buffer, but it needs to sell that oil in order to survive.
International sanctions are incredibly dangerous for Iran itself. Whether sanctions are a threat to the regime is an open question.
Iran is the world's dominant Shia Muslim power. Its revolution was always rooted in a sense of manifest destiny.
At the height of the revolution, the leaders, especially Khomeini, thought this was an Islamic revolution and it could be exportable throughout the Islamic world, especially into the Gulf, in the Arab Saudi Arabia. But what they discovered was that actually the language they used, the symbols they used, were very much Shia symbols. So the slogans, the meaning of the revolution did not really resonate.
Tehran exerts its influence throughout the Middle East by funding and supporting proxy groups in Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria, some of them designated as terrorist organizations by Washington.
Iran supports groups that the United States considers to be terrorist organizations. Hamas, particularly Hezbollah, as well as other sorts of smaller militias and the like that operate in the region. And that, in our definition, makes them a sponsor of terrorism.
I think all you have to do is look at Iranian behavior in Syria, where they're supporting Bashar al-Assad, who has been murdering and carpet bombing his people now for 5 years. You see it certainly in the supply of arms, not only in Syria, but to armed elements in Lebanon through their proxy, Hezbollah. You also see it in Iranian interference in Iraq and influence on the leadership and the Shia paramilitary forces that have challenged the sovereign Iraqi government.
There is some disagreement over whether Iran is the catalyst of regional insecurity, or simply attempting to survive the threat posed by its longtime rival, the Saudis, and the interventions of the United States.
Iran and Saudi Arabia have long been rivals for influence. They've been rivals in terms of Iran being predominantly Shiite, Saudi Arabia being predominantly Sunni. But there are also rivalries over who's the major power in the Persian Gulf.
When the U.S. attacked Iraq, when the U.S. attacked Afghanistan, Iran was against the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. But after it was attacked, practically the door was open for Iran to increase its role in Iraq.
When Saddam was overthrown and you had regimes that were more sympathetic to Iran, I think that's part of what has created this extreme fear, even kind of paranoia, which has led the Saudis to be more reckless, because I think they feel that Iran is a country with a lot of natural political power.
Despite the interest activists spark among Iran hawks and other policymakers, many remain skeptical that they will influence Iran's foreign policy or topple the regime.
The United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not: a comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
In 2015, President Obama, along with European leaders, reached a deal lifting sanctions in exchange for a halt to Iran's nuclear ambitions. To some, the nuclear deal represented a bold step towards thawing relations with Iran in the hopes of enhancing regional security.
Within the society, support for the deal was overwhelming because this was a way for them to break out of their isolation. The population in Iran is very well educated, very modern. They want to be part of the global world.
To others, such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other U.S. allies accustomed to the containment of Iran, any sign of rapprochement was deeply threatening.
There was great fear in Saudi Arabia after the 2015 nuclear deal that it was going to lose its standing, its leverage, its place, its importance with the United States, that the nuclear deal dealt not only with a weapons program, but was also the beginning of a rapprochement politically between the United States and Iran, and Saudi Arabia feared losing its prominence, the role it had played since 1979 in the region and in the world.
The history of the current regime in Iran vis-a-vis Israel runs pretty deep when it comes to hostility. And the statements and the measures that the Iranian government has taken and the ideology that it has clearly is very, very anti-Zionist.
Although the Trump administration backed out of the nuclear deal, Iran has not returned to the pre-deal status quo.
The fact that the United States abandoned the nuclear deal affected Iran economically, but not morally and diplomatically. Because ironically, by moving out of the nuclear deal, it is the United States that is isolated, not Iran.
Iran is more gained from trading with the Europeans than it does with the United States. The problem that it will face is that this administration will hold the Europeans to various secondary sanctions that say, okay, if you want to do business with Iran, you can, but that's going to then limit your access to the U.S. market and the U.S. financial system. And when it comes to a choice like that, that's not a choice.
European powers say they will continue to honor the terms of the agreement, which they see as a more effective way to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons than the decades-old sanctions and isolation policy.
We are making it abundantly clear to the Iranian regime that they will face mounting financial isolation until they fundamentally change their destabilizing behavior.
I do think it's quite possible that the Trump administration, perhaps in conjunction with some Middle Eastern allies, is pushing in various ways for regime change in Iran. I think that they've been pretty open about their hope that sanctions will lead to some kind of uprising against the regime. It's a reasonable bet that they're also doing things behind the scenes to try to stoke opposition to the Iranian regime that they would hope would lead to regime change.
We're seeing a real contrast between the Trump administration's response to popular protest in Iran as compared to the Obama administration. The Obama administration took a very cautious stance. The Trump administration does not seem to have those concerns.
President Trump's actually using the demonstrations to undermine the regime and saying basically the U.S. supports the protesters and we're good guys because we hear your protests, which doesn't really go down very well in Iran.
This president does not intend to turn his back on freedom fighters.
President Trump's policies towards the Islamic Republic expose a deeper divide within Washington on future Iran policy.
The debate is more about how do you deal with Iran? Is Iran, as the Islamic Republic, a problem for the United States? I think there's broad consensus, yes. But is Iran an actor we can deal with? Or should Iran be an actor we try to contain? Or is ultimately the objective to get rid of the Islamic Republic? There you see debates in the American political system.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger.
As Washington looks at Iran, and you carry that back through any number of our administrations, there's always been a debate over what should we do, when should we do it, who should we do it with.
Iran and its relationship with the United States are at a crossroads, and it's not clear which way its government or its people will turn.
Great Decisions is America's largest discussion program on global affairs. Discussion groups meet in community centers, libraries, places of worship, and homes across the country to discuss global issues with their community. Participants read the 8-topic briefing book, meet to discuss each topic, and complete a ballot, which shares their views with Congress. To start or join a discussion group in your community, visit greatdecisions.org or call 1-800-477-5836. Great Decisions is produced by the Foreign Policy Association in association with Thomson Reuters. Funding for Great Decisions is provided by PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP and the Nelson B. Delavan Foundation.